Let's take a magical walk back in time to the 1820s, a decade when fashion turned dreamy, emotional, and a little dramatic. Welcome to the romantic era of women's dress, where every outfit told a story. By the early 1820s, the fashion world was saying goodbye to the simple, white, high waisted gowns of the Regency period. Instead, women embraced richer colors, dramatic shapes, and lots of historical inspiration. This shift wasn't just about clothes, it was part of a bigger cultural movement called Romanticism. People were tired of cold, industrial life and longed for imagination, beauty, and nostalgia. Dresses started looking like something out of an old painting, borrowing ideas from the medieval, Renaissance, and Baroque eras, thanks to the popularity of historical novels, especially by Sir Walter Scott. Even Scottish tartans became trendy. And of course, Paris led the way. Stylish royals like Mary Caroline, Duchess de Berry were the influencers of the day. In the early 1820s, dresses still had that empire style, waistlines just below the bust and slightly flured skirts. But things were already shifting. Year by year, the waistline dropped. By 1825, it had returned to the natural waist. The look became more structured. Tight corsets, wider skirts, and larger sleeves created that dramatic hourglass shape. Women wore long, laced corsets with added paddings for the bust and hips, topped with wide belts to emphasize their tiny waists. Below the waist, skirts grew fuller and fuller, supported by layers of stiff petticoats. By the late 1820s, dressmakers had to start pleating fabrics at the waistband to handle the volume. Hems were just above the floor, not as long as before, sometimes revealing ankles and shoes. Heavily decorated hems made this shorter length practical. A small bustle pad, a stuffed cushion, was even added at the back of the waist to push the skirt outward and complete that famous bell shape. By 1830s, the silhouette was dramatic, a wasp waist squeezed between huge slits and a grand skirt. Observers joked that a woman's arm looked twice the size of her waist. Romantic fashion was all about color. The plain white muslins of the past were replaced with bright silks, fine cottons, and bold prints. Silks like taffeta and satin, and cottons like voile, lawn, and calico were all in style. Popular colors included deep blues, sunny yellows, emerald greens, and a brilliant red called turkey red. Dresses often mixed multiple colors and patterns for a joyful, expressive look. One outfit might feature a floral print dress with a striped shawl and a dotted trim. Sheer fabrics also came back. Tulle, net, and gauze were layered over satin slips for evening wear, creating a shimmering, fairy-like effect. Blonde lace, a soft silk lace, was hugely popular for trimming dresses, collars, and headwear. With industrial advances, machine-made knitting became cheap and widespread, adding even more decorative possibilities. These fabrics weren't just beautiful, they were light and soft enough to create all the movement, ruffles, and puffiness that the romantic style demanded. If you had to pick one thing that defined 1820s fashion, it's the sleeves. Early in the decade, women wore gently puffed sleeves gathered at the shoulder. But by the mid 1820s, they grew into giant gigot or leg of mutton sleeves, huge at the top, tight at the wrist. These balloon-like sleeves grew so large that women used padded cushions and stiff fabrics to support them. Sleeve supporters were tied to the arm or corset to keep them from dropping. Sleeve variation included Marie sleeves, puffs tied with ribbons down the arm, and imbecile sleeves, completely puffed from shoulder to wrist. Yes, the name joked that you would be crazy to wear them. Sleeves weren't just big, they were also decorated. Dressmakers created slashed sleeves like those from Renaissance fashion, with fabric peeking out underneath. They added decorative shoulder flaps, called mancherons, and trimmed sleeves and bodices in zigzag Van Dyck points, mimicking 17th century styles. It was a beautiful mix of historical eras, especially Renaissance and Baroque, with plenty of romantic flair. Romantic dresses loved decoration. Ruffles, pleats, and layered textures gave gowns movement and personality. Skirts were sometimes tied with flounces or edged with bands of contrasting fabric. One standout detail was called the rouleau, a fabric roll stuffed with cotton or wool to form padded lines that outlined seams or hems. These added weight, helping skirts keep their shape and slightly lift off the ground. By the late 1820s, the trend moved from overly fussy trims to more refined finishes like applique work or deep borders. Bodices featured pleated or crossed fabric, V-shaped seams, piped trim, and high necklines with lace collars or chemises for modest daytime wear. But evening gowns, they dipped off the shoulders with puffed or sheer long sleeves. No matter the time of the day, the romantic dress was full of charm, motion, and delicate touches. For outwear and warm layers, women wore pelisse robes, coat dresses that matched their outfits and could be worn indoors or out. They fastened in front and often looked just like a dress, making them both stylish and functional. Spencer's, the short, waist-length jackets, were still around in the early 1820s, but faded as waistlines dropped. For warmth, full-length mantles or cloaks made of wool or velvet were worn, sometimes trimmed with fur. These had to be large to fit over those big sleeves. Of course, no outfit was complete without a shawl. Large shawls with paisley designs were draped over the shoulders for both warmth and flair. Imported Kashmiri shawls were prized, but European imitations were popular too. A woman might walk through Paris wearing a modest bonnet, gloves, and a richly patterned shawl, showing how outwear blended beauty with function. Bonnets were the must-have accessory of the 1820s, made of straw, silk, or velvet. They had deep brims that framed the face and tied under the chin with wide ribbons. As hairstyles grew taller, bonnets got bigger too, some so large they looked like coal scuttles. They were decorated with lace, gauze, flowers, feathers, and bows. Some women wore wide-brimmed hats, while others favored turbans or small jeweled caps for evening events. Older or married women often wore lace day caps at home, which became more decorated through the decade. Hair accessories like combs, ribbons, pearls, and flowers added a final touch of romance. Jewelry in these years wasn't just for decoration, it was full of meaning, stories, and love. Lockets were especially precious. Women wore them close to their hearts, hiding tiny portraits, locks of hair, or sweet little notes inside. Mourning jewelry made with black jet, onyx, or even woven hair helped people remember someone they had lost but still loved deeply. Nature was everywhere in the designs. Tiny leaves, flowers, acorns, and snakes, all made in gold or silver. Snakes were actually a symbol of forever love and often used in engagement rings. Colorful gems came back into fashion. Garnet, peridot, turquoise, coral, and soft pearls were all favorites. Gold was rich and warm, often decorated with tiny romantic details, and filigree, a delicate lace-like design, made the pieces feel light and dreamy. Classic styles were also popular. Cameos, little carvings in shell or stone, showed beautiful faces or scenes from history. Women wore them on velvet ribbons or elegant brooches. Even tiaras were worn at fancy balls, sparkling like something out of a fairy tale. But most magical of all, jewelry had its own secret language. A brooch shaped like a flower might say, I love you. A ring with ivy leaves might whisper, I will always be with you. So when you see a vintage locket or an old cameo, know this. It's not just a jewelry. It's a piece of someone's heart from a time when love was worn like a treasure. In the dreamy 1820s, even a handkerchief could speak from the heart, soft, lacy, and often embroidered with tiny flowers. It wasn't just for show, it was full of hidden meanings. A lady's handkerchief was like a secret message, whispered without words. Tucked into a sleeve or held gently in her hand. It moved with her, graceful, delicate, and full of feeling. Just one flutter could say she was shy or maybe falling in love. It could catch a tear, wave a gentle goodbye, or even accidentally fall to catch a gentleman's eye. In this romantic time when emotions were everything, the handkerchief became a symbol of a woman's quiet strength, mystery, and charm. Hairstyles in the 1820s became taller and more detailed. In the early years, women wore center parts with ringlets or sausage curls, framing the face and the rest tied into a bun. By mid-decade, the Apollo knot took over. Hair looped high on the crown, secured with combs and surrounded by curls at the temples. Toward the late 1820s, a style called à la chinoise became popular. Braids and loops arranged in bunches at the back with curled bangs or side ringlets in front. These styles were accessorized with jewels, tortoiseshell combs, and strings of pearls. Flowers were often pinned in for evening looks. The goal? Height, elegance, and a swan-like silhouette to match the wide dresses and the big sleeves. Footwear was delicate yet practical. For dancing and evening events, women wore silk or satin slippers, thin, flat, and sometimes barely covering the foot. They were dyed to match the gown and might be topped with bows or rosettes. For daytime and walking, ankle-high half boots became popular. These had cloth uppers, leather soles, side laces, and sometimes small heels. They were durable and stylish, perfect for a walk or a carriage ride. With the invention of rubber, women even wore overshoes in bad weather to protect their delicate footwear. Fashion plates of the time often showed a glimpse of embroidered stockings and dainty shoes, small touches that added to the elegance. In the end, fashion in this decade was influenced by culture, literature, and history. The Industrial Revolution made fabrics more available. Fashion magazines spread styles quickly across Europe and America. From every gathered skirt to every twirling ribbon, the fashion of 1821 to 1830 was about romance. Women dressed to express beauty, fantasy, and imagination. These were not just clothes, they were characters in a story. It was a time when sleeves reached the sky, skirts swept the floor, and bonnets turned heads. And even now, when we look at paintings or preserved gowns from this period, we can still feel the magic. The Romantic era didn't just change fashion, it turned it into an art. Thank you for spending this time with me, walking through an era where every stitch told a story and every silhouette held a little bit of poetry. If you have made it this far, know that I'm truly grateful. I hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I did. Until our next story unfolds, I leave you in the gentle care of time. Take care and see you soon.